You're welcome.
And welcome everyone to Who Babies Will Be in 2037. We have about an hour, and we need to end at 4:30. And I'm going to introduce each of the panelists and give a little overview first. And then when we're done, we'll have more comments from you, interactions, more questions, whatever really you want to talk about. And then Nancy Balaban to the far left, who of course you know, will give final comments and remarks. You might be wondering why, when things are so difficult in the funding and political worlds that make services to very young children possible, why we're concerned with what's going to happen a quarter century from now. Did we come up with this panel to scare you or to make you hopeful? Our panelists will probably, I've seen their comments, will probably scare you a bit and make you hopeful. But most of all, our goal really is for you to think about who babies are now and therefore use that to think about who we can help them become as we move into the future. I have to say that people have been asking me what made me have this idea, and I thought it came from a book that I had read called Teaching 2030 by someone named Barnett Berry, who was a visiting scholar here last year. And among other observations, he noted that 21st century students don't just think about different things, but they think differently. And that shouldn't surprise us, but it got me thinking about how babies would be different. But recently, with some reflection, I realized that there was also an intergenerational pull for me that made me start thinking about this. And that is that as a child, my mother and her best friend would sit around the kitchen table whenever her friend came to town and discuss and sometimes argue and sometimes fight about which era in history was better or worse. So I remember coming in and out, coming in for a glass of milk or whatever, and they would be saying, was the Vietnam War really worse than the Crusades, or was it just that we could see it all on television? And then as history went on, I overheard things like, was the bubonic plague worse than the worldwide AIDS epidemic? And so those kinds of questions, I guess, have been a part of me, because here I am, 25 years later, of the 25th anniversary of the Institute, wondering not so much who babies will be, but what kind of world we'll create for them so they can be. So it's not so much about predicting behavior, but just taking a moment in time to reflect on who they are. Will there be babies with more neurological constraints? Will stresses of poverty and non-optimal care translate into early genetic changes that affect brain development, as has recently been demonstrated by Megan Gunner and her colleagues? She worked with rats in labs, and Charlie Zena has done research on orphans in Eastern Europe. I have no idea. I really can't tell. But there's one thing that I can tell, and that is that if women have less access to birth control and abortion, there is just one thing that we can be sure of, and that is that there will be more babies, and there will be more unwanted babies. So on that bright note, I'm very proud to have with us today 4 graduates of the Infant and Family Development and Early Intervention Program. They were really selected for the different types of engagement they have in the infancy world. And clearly this was a good move because, as you'll see, they have focused on very different ideas about how we might think about what babies need now and into the distant future. So whether you're a glass half empty kind of gal or guy like me, or a glass half full, like some of the people on the panel, it's our hope that everyone here will think about advocacy roles that you might play in the intervening 24 years so that babies and families will have the most and best providers, caregivers, and social systems to support them.